What's going on, my babies? Welcome back to another episode of the Spiritual Word. As always, I apologize for any noises in the background in advance and anything of that nature. And also, before I start these, I like to start these off with a disclaimer by stating that these are for entertainment purposes only, and to always do your own research, to come to your own conclusions, to have your own answers, to make your own decisions. And I believe in your ability to do so and to be your own person, as you've shown me by clicking on today's episode. And also, before I start these, I have a audio version of the podcast anywhere you can find audio podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere. And I have a video version of the podcast. The same exact episode goes up on YouTube. They're both named The Spiritual Word. I'm your host, Jackie. I upload Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. And if science, psychology, spirituality, self-help, and philosophy are things that you're interested in or things that you're into, then I recommend subbing or following whatever platform you find me on. So, as you guys already know, I was kind of like hopping in and out of reading this book and doing spirituality, this is quotation mark, spirituality for dummies, because I just think that, I don't know, I feel like if you don't put things in like a simple way, if you don't put things in a simple way, quotation marks, then most people don't receive it well, if that makes sense. So that's why I call my crash course on spirituality for dummies. But that has nothing to do with intelligences or like anything of that nature. Anyways, if you're returning or new, I call my viewership my babies, and so thank you for being here. Thanks for watching or listening, whatever platform you're finding me on. As always, you know that I love you and I appreciate you for being here, which is why I call you my babies, because I find that to be an endearing term. And if you don't like that, let me know on my Discord, and that the invite to my Discord is in my Instagram bio, and I always leave my Instagram under all of these descriptions. So if you want to go there to get all of the links, because my Instagram has all my links, it has my link tree. So, you can just click on that, and I know it's so many clicks. But it is what it is, you know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. So we're on chapter 17, and this one's a little bit of a longer chapter than yesterday, so it's going to take me a little bit. And chapter 17, the title is Compassionate Action. And also bear with me, because I could barely read. I could barely function as is. So, bear with me. And also, if you're new, we're reading Start Where You Are by Pema Chodron this week until I finish the book, which we only have like 6 more chapters or something like that. So let's get into this. How do we help? How do we create a saner world, or a saner domestic situation, or a job situation? Whatever it may be, how do we work with our action and our speech and our minds in a way to open up this space rather than to close it down? In other words, how do we create space for other people and ourselves to connect with our inner wisdom, with our own wisdom? How do we create space where we can find out how to become more a part of this world we're living in, and less separate and isolated and afraid? How do we do all that? How do we do that? It starts with loving kindness for oneself, which turns into loving kindness for others. As the barriers come down around our hearts, we are less afraid of other people. We are more able to we're more able to hear what is being said, see what's in front of our eyes, and work in accord with what happens rather than to struggle against it. The Lojong teachings say that the way to help is to act compassionately, is to exchange oneself for other. When you can put yourself in someone else's shoes, then you know what is needed and what would speak to the heart. I recently received a letter from a friend in which she is dumped all over and told me off. Which she dumped all over me and told me off. My first reaction was to be hurt. My second reaction was to be mad. And I began to compose a letter in my mind. This very dharmic letter that I was going to write back that I was going to write back to her using the teachings and the Lojong logic to tell her off. Because the style of our relationship, she would have been intimidated by the Dharmic letter. I'm already struggling. This is bad. It's not bad. It's a joke. Anyways, because our style of relationship, she would have been intimidated by the Dharmic letter. But it wouldn't have helped anything. It would have further focused on us and our roles being into two separate people, each of us believing in our own roles more and more seriously. That I was the one who knew it all and that she was the poor student. But that day I had spent so much energy composing this letter that just by a turn of circumstance, something happened to me that caused me to feel tremendous loneliness. I felt sad and vulnerable. And in that state of mind, I suddenly knew where my friend was coming from, where my friend's letter was coming from. The loneliness, the feeling left out. It was her attempt to communicate. Sometimes when we're feeling miserable, you challenge people to see if they will still like you when you show them how ugly you can get. Because of how I myself was feeling, I knew what she needed, and it was not someone to dump back on her. So I wrote a different letter from what I had planned. An extremely honest one. You can dump on me all you like and put all your stuff out there. I'm not going to give up on you. It was a wishy-washy letter to avoid the issues that were there, that had been a confrontation. And I had been hurt by it. But on the other hand, it was a letter. It wasn't a letter in which I went into the other extreme and lashed out. For the first time I had an experience where I meant to exchange myself for other, where I had been there. You know what it feels like, and therefore I can give something that you know will open up the space to create and cause the things to keep flowing. You give something that will help someone, either help someone else feel their own insight and courage and gentleness, rather than to further polarize the situation. Drive all blame into one is a pivotal slogan, because usually driving blame into others comes from the fact that we've been hurt, and we therefore want to hurt back. It's that kind of logic. Therefore, the exchange of putting yourself in other people's shoes doesn't come from a theory in which you try to imagine someone else's feelings, but it comes from becoming so familiar and so open-hearted and so honest about who you are and what you do that you begin to understand the humanness altogether, and you can speak appropriately to the situation. The basic ground of compassion and action is important of working with rather than to struggle against. And what I mean by that is working with your own unwanted, unacceptable stuff, so that when the unacceptable and unwanted appears out there, you relate to it based on have worked on love and kindness for yourself. There is no condescension, no non-dualistic approach is true. No, wait, hold on, sorry. This non-dualistic approach is true to the heart because it's based off our own kinship with others, with each other. Jesus. We know what to say because we have experienced closing down, shutting off, being angry, hurt, rebellious, and so forth, and have made a relationship with those things in ourselves. It's not about problem resolution. It's more of an open-ended and courageous approach. It has nothing to do with not knowing what will happen. It has nothing to do with wanting to get around. It has nothing to do with wanting to get ground underneath your feet. It's about keeping your heart and your mind open to whatever arises without hope of fruition. Problem solving is based first on thinking that there's a problem, and second on thinking there's a solution. The concept of a problem and solution keeps us stuck in thinking that there is an enemy, or a saint, or a right way and a wrong way. The approach that we suggest is more groundless than that. The slogan here is to change your attitude but remain neutral. Or change your attitude and just relax as it is. In order to have compassionate relationships, compassionate communication, compassionate social action, there has to be a fundamental change of attitude. The notion, I am the helper and you are the one who needs help, might work in a temporary way, but fundamentally nothing changes because there's still one who has it and one who doesn't. The non-dualistic notion is not really speaking to the heart. It expresses the Lojong teachings that fundamentally change the attitude to the breath and undesirable in and breathing and breath. Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to reread that sentence. Hold on. As expressed in the Lojong teachings, that fundamental change of attitude is to breathe the undesirable in and breathe the desirable out. In contrast, the attitude that is epidemic on the planet is that if it's unpleasant, we push it away, and if it's pleasant, we hold on to it and grasp it. This change in attitude doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually, at our own speeds. If we have the aspiration to stop resisting those parts of ourselves that we find unacceptable and instead breathe them in and give them much more space, we can know each part of ourselves. With no monster in the closet, no demon in the cave. We have some sense of turning on the lights and looking at ourselves honestly, with great compassion. We could begin to get the hang of changing our attitudes in everyday level. When things are delightful and wonderful, we give our pleasure away in the outbreath, sharing it with others. That also allows for enormous space, not just for us, but for everyone. When we do this, our inner obstacles that keep us from connecting with our own inherent freshness and openness begins to dissolve. This fundamental change in attitude is working with pain and pleasure. It is in a revolutionary and courageous way. When we work with pain by leaning into it and work with pleasure by giving it away, it doesn't mean we grin and bear it. This approach is more playful than that. It's like dancing with it. We realize that it's separateness. We realize that this separateness, that we feel, is a funny kind of mistake. We see things we see that thing as non-dualistic. From the start, we wake up to that realization. The basis of any kind of compassionate action is the insight that others who seem to be out there are some kind of mirror image of ourselves. By making friends with yourself, you can make friends with others. By hurting yourself, you hurt others. Another slogan, always abide to the 3 basic principles. The first basic principle is to always abide by any vows you have taken. The refuge vows or becoming a Buddha. The refuge vows you take to become a Buddhist, and the Bodhisattva vows you later take that express your wishes to benefit others. The second principle is to remain from showing off or from outrageous conduct. The third is always to cultivate patience. So if there are three basic principles: keeping the vows you've taken, remaining from outrageous conduct, and cultivating patience. Keep practicing the vows you've taken. The first principle: keep the vows you've taken. Speak specifically to those of us who have taken. Hold on. To keep your vows you have taken, speak specifically to those of us who have taken the refuge vows and the bodhisattva vows. But it may be helpful for everyone to hear a little bit of these vows. The refuge vows is basically about making a commitment to become a refugee, which in essence means that rather than trying to get security, you begin to develop an attitude of wanting to step into uncharted territory. It's a vow that you take because you feel that the way to health and becoming a complete human being is no longer hold is to no longer hold yourself to sorry is a vow that you take because you feel the way to health and becoming a complete human being is to no longer hold so tightly on yourself. You long to be you long to belong you long to go beyond that situation. You are no longer afraid of yourself. You can become a refugee because you aren't afraid of yourself. You don't feel that you need a protected place to hide in. The image of the Bodhisattva vows could be not afraid of others. When you take the Bodhisattva vows, you open the windows and doors and invite all sentient beings as your guests. Having understood the futility and pain of always holding on to yourself, you want to take the next step and begin to work with others. You might think that you're working with others because you are much more sane than they are, and you want to spread that sanity. But a more profound insight is that you realize that the only way to go further is to open the doors and windows, not to protect yourself anymore, but to work on what arrives. That's the only way to wake up further. The motivation for making friends and family become wanted and to help others. These two work together. You know you can't help others if you're not making friends with yourself. Refrain from outrageous conduct. The second principle is to refrain from outrageous conduct. If you have this idea of yourself as a hero or helper or doctor, or somebody else as the victim, patient, and deprived, and the underdog, you are continually creating the notion of separation, and someone might end up getting more food, better housing, and that's a big help. Those things are necessary, but the fundamental problem of isolation, hatred, and aggression is not addressed. Or perhaps you get flamboyant in your helper role. You often see this with political action. People make a big display and suddenly the whole thing doesn't have anything to do with anyone anymore, but with building themselves up. In the 70s, there was a famous photographer in which the National Guard were all lined up with their guns and at an anti-war rally, and a young woman had walked up and put a flower at the end of the gun, and the photo appeared in the newspaper. I read the report which soldier had been holding that gun, who later became a strong peace activist, said that he had never before experienced anything as aggressive as a young woman coming with a flower and smiling at everybody, making this big display. Most of the young guys in the National Guard were already questioning how they got on that particular side of the fence anyways. And then along came this flower child. She had never looked in his eyes. She had never sensed him as a person. It was all for display, and it hurt. So, a part of the point of the slogan, you have to question what's behind your action, especially if it makes a big splash. Cultivating patience. The last of the three principles is to cultivate patience, which is the same as cultivating non-aggression. Patience and non-aggression are basically encouragement to wait. Sometimes I think of Toglin that way. You are in a situation which you would normally yell back or throw something or think of this person. You are in the same old stuck way instead it occurs to you to begin to do in exchange for others. This whole solid sense of self and others begins to get addressed when you cultivate patience. You learn to pause, you learn to wait, you learn to listen, and learn to look, allowing yourself and others some space, just slowing down the camera instead of speeding it up. A little bit of the a little bit of hold on. It's a little bit like the old advice to count to 10 before saying something. It makes you pause. If you become afraid or angry, there is a natural kind of adrenaline principle. When the camera actually starts to speed up, the speed itself can bring you back into the present. You can use this as a reminder to slow down, listen, look, and wait, and develop patience. Abandon poisonous foods and don't make gods into demons are warnings that you hold on. Abandon poisonous food and don't make gods into demons are warnings that only you know whether what you're doing is good. Practice. I don't know why I read that like a question. Anything could be used to build yourself up and smooth things over and calm things down or just keep things under control. Good food becomes poisonous food, and gods become demons when you use them to keep yourself in that room with the doors and the windows closed. Another slogan that concerns compassionate action: work with the greatest defilements first. Develop loving kindness for yourself is the basic for compassionate communication and relationship. The time is now, not later. The greater defilement is what you would consider the greatest obstacle. The slogan suggests that you start where you feel the most stuck, making friends with that, and beginning to automatically take care of the smaller obstacles. Because the larger obstacles like rage, jealousy, terror are so dramatic, they're so vivid. Their vividness itself may be a reminder to work with the practice of Toglin. We may also take for granted a multitude of minor daily irritations that we don't think of as something we can work with. To some degree, they are the hardest obstacle to work with because they don't reveal themselves. The only way that you know what these are arising is if you feel righteous indignation. Letting righteous indignation be your guide, that is something that someone, hold on, let righteous indignation be your guide, that someone is holding on to themselves. And that's someone is probably you. If you begin to work with the greater defilement or major stuck places, these little ones tend to become more obvious to you as well. Whereas if you try to work with all the little ones, they're right They're like your hands and your nose. You don't even think of them as anything but you. There is no sense of them as an obstacle. You just let them by every time they happen. Our greatest obstacles are our greatest wisdom. And all that unwanted stuff is there. And in all the unwanted stuff, there is something sharp and penetrating. There is great wisdom there. Suppose anger and rage, what we consider our greatest obstacles, there may be an addiction and craving. The breeds of all kinds of conflict and tension and stress, but at the same time, there is penetrating quality that cuts through all the confusion and illusion, and is both at once. When you realize your greatest defilement is facing you, there seems no way to get out of it because it's so big. The instruction is to let go of the storyline. Let go of the conversation and your own feelings completely. Let the words go and return to the in-breath and the notion of making friends with ourselves at a profound level. In the process, we're making friends with all sentient beings, because that's what life is made of. Working with the greatest defilements first is saying that now is the time, and also that our greatest obstacles are our greatest wealth. From the point of view of wanting to stay cozy and separate in your room, this work is extremely threatening. Part of the path of compassionate action is to begin to explore the notion of the in-breath and test it. See if it rings true for you. Okay, I finished. Sorry that I'll be struggling to read, but it is what it is. Anyways, let's see. The next chapter is really short. Yesterday, I think I already told you guys, but yesterday was my birthday. And so if you could kindly support me. It's not that deep, but still. And tomorrow we'll do chapter 18, taking responsibility for our own actions. And we're like 4 chapters away from being done with this book. I want to check. 4. Well, 5 if you include tomorrow's. But I want to talk about that chapter. Oh my goodness. I want to talk about that chapter. That book always makes me like really relaxed. I think it's reading. Reading makes me relax, but I want to talk about what's it called? The showing out. Because I feel like I always make this not necessarily known, but like I try to elevate people, and they try to pull themselves back down, if that makes sense. And I get it, because like I do the same thing. Like one of my spiritual mentors, she's just my friend, but like the person that gave me that book to begin with, she would always tell me like, you have to believe in yourself, you have to go after the things you want. And she would always tell me like, do the podcast, and if that's something that you want to see in your life, then just do that thing, and do that thing like naturally. And go out of my way to promote and shit, which I have been doing for the past couple of months. I want to say the past like 6 months I've been promoting almost daily. And I just lost my train of thought. I don't think that mattered. So anyways, I want to talk about what it means to make right action, or what it means to make friends with like all the bad, icky quotation marks. Quotation marks, the bad, icky stuff, because those are your juicy stuff, as the book literally says. So one thing that I used for the past 2 years is my family, because I feel like your family is the most karmic connection that you have in life, because you can't really get away from them. Obviously, you can. Like, if you just decide, I'm out this bitch, like, fuck all you guys, like, obviously you can. But I don't want to do that, if that makes sense. And I don't think that my family has ever, like, done shit that's so bad to me that makes me want to be like, deuces, I fucking hate all of you, Like, it's not that deep for me. And I've never really experienced that much shit. Like, I've experienced shit with my family, but compared to a lot of other people, I'm chilling. You know what I mean? So I think that's another reason why I use my family as a way to connect to the juicy stuff, because I feel like that's where I feel those things. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that, like, I can't make myself feel an emotion, because I can, like, if I really sit there and try to bring it out of myself. Like, if I really sit here and think about, like, a really joyful memory, it will make me happy. You know what I mean? Or if I sit here and I think of, um, like, a really sad topic, it can make me sad, but it doesn't always have that effect on me. Like, if I sit here and I try to meditate about something that made me so upset, it usually doesn't work. At least it doesn't work the same or as strong or as fast as it works when my family pisses me off, or when I get on my game and there's people who are just sitting in corners trying to get me. You know what I mean? And in those moments, obviously kind of let myself feel them. And I either sometimes I'll let them pass me. I'm not gonna sit here and, like, lie to you, because there's no point of lying. So sometimes, yeah, I do let them pass, and I do let those things kind of slip through my hand. But at the same time, I recognize that it's happening. And I think that that's a powerful enough image in my mind for me to go back to and to think about. And then, rather than beat myself up for letting those things slip by, be happy that I let them slip by, because it's not that serious of a situation. And sometimes, and what I mean by slip by is that, like, I'll get upset. In that moment, I will get upset and I will be angry and I will get pissed off, but it doesn't really go any further than that. Like, I'll just be like, oh, fuck you. And then, like, it's over, you know? Or sometimes I'll just say it in my head if I can't say it to the person, or if I don't want to say it to the person, because it'll make even more conflict. But nevertheless, it's still happening, regardless of whether it's actually happening in my reality or if it's just happening in my mind. And in those moments where I let those things slip or I let those things happen, I try not to, like, judge myself for letting those things happen, because I'm human, and I'm also trying to, like, teach myself how to feel, if that makes sense. Because I think that the reason that I don't do certain things, like, for example, I was talking about my spiritual teacher and, like, how she would try to lift me up and I'd pull myself back down. I think that the reason that I'd pull myself back down is because I don't know how to feel. And because I don't know how to feel, I don't know how to use my feelings, if that makes sense. And not that you really need to, like, know how to use your feelings, but I feel like it's beneficial for you to understand what you're feeling, at least. You know what I mean? And I wasn't somebody who was smart enough to ask those questions at a young age. I wasn't smart enough to ask my parents, like, "Oh, why do I feel like this?" I don't feel like that's something that we really think about, because it's so constant. It's something that happens to you every single freaking minute of the day. Like, you feel something every single minute of the day, even if that something is nothing. And it wasn't ever a question of mine to ask myself why I felt those things. So now, when those feelings arise, I allow those things to arise so I can see where it's coming from. And not only see where it's coming from, but try to understand and make friends with that emotion. Like, my anger is something that I struggle with a lot. And I don't think people recognize how much I struggle with my anger, but I overcome it every single time. So I don't say that I struggle with it, but it's the most common one. Like, it's the one that I feel the strongest all the time. Like, when, well, sometimes it's laughter, but that's not a struggle, you know what I mean? But it's like a common one. It's always laughing and being angry because the things that I do, like, it's very common to have things irritate you. Like, it's a very common thing. And it's one of the most common one of my emotions. And so when I experience irritation, it's mainly because of my family. Not really anymore, because I've been working on this the past 2 years, but it took me like a decent amount of time to even figure out and to process that they were triggering the things in me that I hadn't realized were there, if that makes sense. Like, when I was a teenager, I was a fucking angry teenager, but I didn't really recognize that I was angry because it would only come out at home. And I always thought like, oh, it's because, it's my family's fault and blah 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 and whoop de doo. And I think that it was me giving them grief because of the things that I saw that are just human. And then like 2 years ago I had this epiphany that, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm being so hard on them, but they're just a human being. And as soon as I kind of like released that anger and realized that that anger was actually coming from me, being hard on them and being that authority figure to them, because I'm that authority figure to me. Like, I have myself so regulated that it's unhealthy. You know what I mean? Like, you don't really recognize the things that you're doing that are unhealthy until you really sit down with yourself and address those things. And that was one of the things that I just happened to address. And the reason that, like, all these things intertwine, so basically I'm just like ranting on how this chapter relates to me. But that got me to a point where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do these things and hopefully they'll pick up the hint and like they'll do the same things. And so unconsciously, I was actually doing the opposite of what I was supposed to be doing. And instead of making friends with myself, I was kind of like running on a rat wheel and doing something because I thought that there would be value accumulated, but really there was no value accumulated. But there was value accumulated because it still worked for me, if that makes sense. Like, you know how rats, they run on this wheel, and maybe if they don't realize that it's a wheel, they might be thinking that they're sprinting miles and miles and miles, you know? But they're not running miles and miles and miles and miles. But regardless, it doesn't mean that it wasn't beneficial because they still got a workout. They still exuded the energy that they wanted to exude. And so, in a way of me pulling myself down in this format of like my spiritual teacher being like, oh, you can do whatever you want, like you have so much potential, blah blah blah. Obviously she didn't use those words, but like trying to lift me up. And in the moment where I'd pull myself back down, I recognized that I was pulling myself back down and how I was pulling myself back down and how I was pulling myself back down with other people and pretending to sit there and be like, you're pulling me down, when in fact I was pulling myself down. But I needed to recognize what it meant to pull yourself down in the first place. And then finally, when that clicked for me, because I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but when it finally clicked for me, I was like, oh my gosh, like I was really trying to work out on a rat wheel, thinking that I was running miles and miles, thinking I was running a marathon. But it turns out I was still in the same place and there was nowhere to go because there was nowhere to go. It's like running on a rat wheel and being like, why didn't I move? Because there was nowhere to go. And the only thing that I needed to do was recognize that I was on the rat wheel. And I think that's another reason why I do what I do. Because, like, been there, done that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't help people because people are, wah, boo-hoo, poor people. You know what I mean? I do it because shit is fucking rough out here. And I know if I'm struggling, gotta be somebody else that's struggling. Even worse. And I always think about that too. Like, when I was a kid, I used to, like, preach. I was like, I'm a broke ass bitch. But it wasn't really the case. Like, I always had shelter, even if I had to move states. And, my family moved a lot. But I was never really concerned with that. Like, to me, it was kind of refreshing. Like, I enjoyed the journey that I was on, even though the journey that I was on wasn't really, like, by definition, it's not good to lose your house. By definition, it's not good to get your car fucking sent back to the dealership. You know what I mean? Like, when they take it away from you. And, by nature, it's not good to not have heat in the winter, especially where it snows. But at the same time, like, I was chilling. You know what I mean? Like, I was chilling. And I never really recognized how fortunate I was because of how much everybody around me would cry about how unfortunate our situation was and our circumstances was. And I was picking that up, them traits, them qualities. And then finally, when I like realized I'm trying to lift up these other people and they're pulling themselves down, I can help you recognize that you're pulling yourself down. You know what I mean? Like, that's something that you have to go through your own process of like getting to know yourself, being friends with yourself, caring about yourself. And I think that people have this misconception that caring about yourself is like cheesy, or they don't know how, because caring about yourself is like, oh, it's okay. Like, when you have a boo boo, like, you see all these fucking scars, it's like sitting here and being, no. Caring about yourself is sitting there when you feel the pain of this and being like, it's not that bad. Even though it is. You know what I mean? Like, when I freaking got these burns, I didn't even recognize. I thought I was a little bitch. I thought I was a bitch. And so I was at work, and I work. Yes, I work. But I work because, I need to like go out and do shit in the world because I get bored. But I work, and I work with fryer oil because I work at a fast food place. And I got burned because I'm dropping food into these burning fryers, and the food slipped because I was wearing gloves, and it splashed, and I really didn't even have like, I reacted to it. Obviously, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I moved my hands away as fast as I could, but I didn't back my whole body up, so it splashed and it hit my forearm. And that shit, it hurt, right? Obviously, it's burning oil. But when I was in high school, I had put a solid freaking frozen, like solid frozen, um, piece of what is it called? It was a piece of. It was a piece of. I think it was. I know what it is, but like the words are slipping away. It was a piece of hash brown, a frozen brick of hash brown, right? And I had turned on the oil. I'd put it, and I'd put a hot pan of oil on the stove, had that bitch on high, and then as soon as I, heard it like popping and fizzling, I slapped that freaking solid frozen piece of freaking ice, water in a fryer. And that shit splashed and it hit like the side of my face. And when I tell you that shit hurt, like, it hurt bad. But neither of the times that happened to me was I like, oh my gosh, ow, you know? And that's when I realized that I'm not a little bitch. So, like, if I can get burned in physical life, if the physical doesn't hurt me as much as my emotions hurt me, why am I still bitching about it? And not to say that that's like a bad thing, but like emotionally, I am a bitch. But when it comes to like physical things, I'm really not. Like, I'm dramatic. I'm dramatic as fuck. But it's not even that deep. You know what I mean? And I think the more that I'm reading this book with you guys, the more I'm recognizing the qualities that that book talks about. And I'm recognizing my own Buddha nature. Even though I'm not Buddhist, like, I'm not Buddhist, like, I don't have that title, and I didn't take my vows, but I did take my Bodhisattva vows, which talks about literally just helping other people. And the person that I did it with was a Rinpoche, and he was so fun and so silly. I feel like I was talking to myself. Like, genuinely, I felt like that was me. And when I took my Bodhisattva vows, he literally just said, just promise to be a good person. And I was like, I'm the soldier, I got you, you know? So now I just make these videos, these episodes for fun because it's my past, it's part of who I am now. And anyways, my burn, this happened like a week ago and it's already healing. Like the biggest one that I have is fading already. Like it's just blending. And also, it was so weird because when I came home after burning myself with hot fry oil, I laid down in bed and I was like, wow, I am so strong. Like I did not even complain. Even though I was like, can I go get water? Because like I'm gonna need a break after this. Because like I burned myself. But I wasn't like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, you know? And I feel like I would have been like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And the fact that I wasn't, I impressed myself. And then when I got home, these scars were already fading. And I was like, oh my god, my body peaking. Not my body peaking, you know? I was like, oh my gosh, good job. Good job, me. Good job, youth. I love it here. And anyways, also, I just turned 25, so technically this is my peak. I'm here. I just got here. Like that one guy who they come over with a microphone and they're like, how many genders are there? And he's like, I don't know, I just got here. That's me. I just got here. But anyways, I just ranted. I hope that this was helpful and that it was beneficial in some way, shape, and form, whether or not, you know, it was just fun for you to watch, or if we actually got through to you through the book. So I'm sorry if you can hear that. But anyways, thanks for tuning in and tapping in. And I will see you in the next one. And as always, I love you and I appreciate you for being here. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.